right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I think we're all here. Welcome to our member meetup. I'm so excited today. We are here with Ann Bullard, one of our fabulous board members, and Margi Dykens, our research library director. And we're celebrating our 146th anniversary at the museum. And so I'm excited for you to meet them both. They are our history buffs of the museum. Let's go ahead and share our results of our poll. Looks like the majority of you are fall people. I also like the fall, though I do miss the changing of the colors here in San Diego. Don't always get to see some of those. All right, let's go ahead and close that down. So like I mentioned before, you are muted. Your cameras are turned off. So if you need to grab some coffee, grind coffee beans, no worries. You can go ahead and do that. We are recording the session. So if you want to tune in later and rewatch it, you're welcome to do that. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to Ann.
Well, thank you, Emily. Good morning. I'm Ann Bullard, and as Emily said, I'm a board member here at the NAT, and I'm co-author of the book Inspired by Nature, which we did for the 125th anniversary of the museum. And I've been involved with the museum since my graduate school days, when I spent a lot of time in the library and the archives, and I actually worked in the library for a short time. And I was so happy to get to know Margi when she was hired in the late 1990s, really a great addition to the library. So Margi, can you tell us, how did you find your way to the NAT?
Well, it's kind of a long story, okay? So I'll try to make it concise, somewhat concise. The interesting thing about it is I was living in Ann Arbor, Michigan at the time. And my background, let me back up just a minute and say I had already gotten a master's in biology at the College of William and Mary in Virginia, Williamsburg, Virginia, several years before. And I was, over the years, I had moved several times with my ex-husband. And every time we moved, I tried to find a job in biology and I hadn't been able to find anything. So there I was on Ann Arbor at the University of Michigan campus. And I thought, I'm really interested in museums, and they had a museology program, a graduate program. So I went over there one day and spoke to the director of the program and said, you know, I'm interested in getting my graduate degree. And he said, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but we just shut this program down this year because we don't have enough, our graduates are not getting jobs. And so we feel really bad about continuing this program, and we've decided to shut it down. And I thought, oh, darn, that's a real blow. What am I going to do? And he said, well, I see that you already have a master's in biology, and I happen to know that science librarians are really in demand. So I would suggest you go over and talk to the library school, which I hadn't even considered before. So anyway, I went across campus and I spoke to the people at the library school there. The University of Michigan has a really great library graduate program. And I enrolled, and actually it was a great program. I got through in 2 years. And before I even finished my degree there, I had a job on campus, on one of the libraries on campus. And then we moved to San Diego, and I saw there was an opening at the San Diego Natural History Museum library. So I thought, well, that's really cool. And so I applied for that, got the job, and I ended up in a museum anyway. So I've always been really...
Did you have any idea what our library had in it when you applied for the job?
Oh, I had done a little research, but no, not really. I mean, I knew it would have to do with natural history, which I loved because I grew up in Florida and I was a very outdoorsy kid. I loved plants and animals and climbing trees and going to the beach and collecting shells. And so I've always been into natural history, really. That was a big favorite of mine. So, but no, I had no idea how cool the library was.
So when you got there at first, what was your impression? I mean, did you realize right away what a interesting and unique library it was, or how long did it take before you realized that?
Um, it took me no, I did. I mean, the more I got to know about it, the more I realized how deep and broad the library was, you know. But I will hasten to add, I was a little overwhelmed because my training in library school was as a reference librarian. So I didn't know anything about rare books. I didn't know anything about maps. I mean, being a solo librarian, excuse me, and having to deal with all those other aspects rather than just reference was a lot. So I was a little bit overwhelmed, but I loved it. And I was blown away by how impressive it was.
And so it sounds like you had to kind of figure out, there wasn't someone who told you this is how to be the librarian at this institution. You had to kind of figure that out. So can you talk a little bit how your role has evolved?
Well, oh my gosh, I've been there 23 years. Okay. So talk about evolving. Yeah. I mean, when I first started out, I literally just worked in the library. I did all the standard things that you do in libraries, purchase books and check in periodicals and handle the billing and shelving and answer reference questions and so on and so forth. But, libraries have changed so much over the years, all, not just my library, but all of them. And so as things evolved, I have become more and more involved in other parts of the museum. So I became much more closely involved with the exhibits people. Um, I have worked more. I don't know how to explain it, but the museum is like a family to me, and almost everybody there I've had some involvement with in one form or another. So, and of course we, fairly recently developed the exhibition that displayed the lovely things from the rare book room. So that was a huge project that took many years. I was involved in writing a book earlier for the Valentine collection. I mean, I had no idea that my career would go so many different directions. It's just,
and with the addition to the museum and the new library that we have now, previously you didn't interact with the public very much because the library was way out of the public view, and now you have much more interaction with the public, and you even run, when you turn the book pages, and you're hosting people in that way now. And can you reflect a little bit on how that's different than what you thought?
Well, it's really exciting. It is very different, and it calls on a different skill set, so becoming a curator, and it's just that actually the experience of creating that exhibition was a highlight of my career, definitely, because working at the Nat, you have so many talented people, creative people, and they're very inspiring to work with, and the objects that we were working with from the rare book room are so beautiful, and it's such a privilege to be able to share that with people. So I find that to be one of the most rewarding parts of my job is to be able to share some of my enthusiasm with people, because I know how lucky I am to be able to just look at these beautiful things and share.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not everybody that gets to do that.
You must have some favorites, objects or books that have risen to the surface over the years. Can you talk about some of your favorite things?
It is hard to pick because there's so many great books in the rare book room. Of course, I love the Audubon Double Elephant Folio. That is a treasure that we have, and I can never get over how fantastic the illustrations are, and how huge they are, how big a book it is. And so that is one of my favorites. But I'm also very partial to a book. The name in Latin is very, very long, so I'm not even going to try to say it, but it amounts to a catalog of the shells that were in the Empress Maria Theresa of Austria, her personal collection of shells.
Oh,
this book was published in 1780, and everything about the book is exquisite. The cover of the leather cover, the beautiful in papers. The quality of the paper, each page is heavy, heavy, acid-free, gorgeous paper with this wonderful texture. And the hand-colored engravings are still to this day regarded as the best illustrations of shells in the world. I mean, they're just remarkable. They're absolutely exquisite.
And do you know if there are other copies of that book? I mean, there must not be very many, but
Yeah, I don't think we don't have the only copy. I'm sure of that because I have seen, really, really big. Probably the New York Public Library has one, maybe Berkeley. I don't know specifically, but it is a truly gorgeous book to look at. So that's I've always been partial to that one.
yeah. And so I know libraries have changed. People get a lot of their information online now, but we do have books that aren't online that you can't get anywhere else. How are these books used now? Do people still come to the museum to use them, or do they just call you and ask what's in the books?
It varies. I mean, I do have researchers who have come. I've had people come from all over the world actually to use some of our resources in the rare book room. I mean, obviously I don't just let anyone in there. I usually bring things out to people and I vet the people carefully. But we have things that we also have things that are just, like our the things in our archives are very important because they're unique resources. So they amount to the early history of the museum and field notes from really early naturalists. And you might think those things are hundreds of years old. How appropriate or necessary are they today? Well, they're very important actually, because those are the things that have enabled our own staff in many cases and other scientists as well to find quote unquote lost species. John Redmond last year came in and he and I poured over a lot of the field notebooks of Charles Orchid, who was one of our early. You're very familiar with him.
Oh yes, I wrote quite a few papers about Charles Orchid.
One of your favorites. Anyway, we have his very early field notes and trips into Baja and his collecting notes, and that alone enabled John to be able to track down where some of these particular plant species were that he was looking for. Not so much because Charles Orchid gave really specific directions like go 3 miles west of this. No,
you're right.
Still had to be a real plant detective, but because John knows so much about the plants, he could look up things like what were the other associated plants that Orchid had found in that area, and that gave him clues. And it was still a detective job, but they're remarkably important, showing change over time with different communities in both Southern California and Baja California, all the things that our research people are studying today.
Yeah. And I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think didn't some family members of Charles Orchid contact the museum and come in? Yeah, and I think periodically, don't you have descendants of some of these?
Yeah, that was a really great experience. I can't remember how he got in touch with me, but he may have passed away by now because that was quite a few years ago. But Mr. Orchid, who I can't remember his first name, but he brought in like 5 or 6 family members, grandchildren, and we toured the whole 3rd floor. We went and looked behind the scenes in the collections because Orchid, of course, he didn't just collect plants. Yeah. He had specimens that were in the herpetology collection. He had collected fossils. So we went around and looked at, they got such a kick out of looking at the labels with his name on it and the information. And of course, this very colorful character.
And I imagine seeing his handwriting.
That was,
I didn't know him at all. I interviewed a cousin or something of his, right. But even just to see I feel that I know him from working with those documents that you can't get anywhere else. Right. I know at Berkeley, they have his West American Scientist publication, but to have those original records, I mean, that is just.
Yeah, it's very different to read something or handle something that's been published and is in a lot of libraries than to read someone's handwritten notes, Yeah. It has a different feel for sure.
Yeah. So this month we're celebrating 146 years. And do you want to tell us a little bit about the founding of the society? The Society of Natural History that.
Sure, in a tiny nutshell.
Yeah.
Well, the early naturalists that we had, I'll just pick two, Daniel Cleveland and Oliver Sanford. They were typical in that they were not professional scientists. Daniel Cleveland was an attorney. He had a law practice in early San Diego, but he was very interested in plants. And you have to remember that at the time San Diego was, just wild pretty much. People were just settling here, and of course there was this wonderful backcountry with all kinds of unexplored chaparral and the mountains, and in the spring, all these fabulous wildflowers would come into bloom. So there was a whole lot for them to explore and learn about. And he was very enthusiastic about that. And his friend, Oliver Sanford, who was a surveyor, he wasn't into plants, he was into beetles. Everybody had their own little specialty. And so they started getting together and talking about the natural history of San Diego. And it kind of grew from there, like Topsy, a lot of other folks who had an interest or passion in some aspect of local natural history would get together and chat about what they were learning. And of course, there weren't libraries, there weren't universities around where they could go and look up stuff. So they were interested in sharing with each other their information. And then by the time the early 1900s came along, they started publishing their own little scientific publications, which we still do today, amazingly enough. Yeah. That was very impressive. And one of the things I always like to emphasize with people is that early on, the San Diego Society of Natural History, which was the parent organization of the museum, decided that it was important to have women join as members. And so from the very beginning, we had women, and which was unheard of at that time, really, to be involved in a science organization. So I think that's a very cool part of our history. So we have people like Rosa Smith Eigenmann,
Yes, I was about to say Rosa Smith Eigenmann, right, who studied fish primarily. Right. And
yeah, she was, that was just so cool that she was our earliest secretary. Not only did she take the notes and the minutes, but she published a lot of stuff in the local San Diego paper. So she publicized what was going on, which was really important to get people interested. So that tradition of citizen science has continued today. We still have a really active program at the Nat with all these citizen science projects going on, even more so now. So I love that idea that we've come full circle from the early days, and we still emphasize the really important contribution that people make who are not trained formally as scientists to ongoing the knowledge that we have today about natural history locally here.
Yeah. Now, you also have done some science illustration, right?
Yes, I worked at Harvard for 5 years as an illustrator at the Arnold Arboretum. So I worked with botanists there. That was my specialty in graduate school as a biology major, was botany. I just got into that. That was another thing I just got into by accident. I never had any training in art or anything, but I just like to draw and I like plants. So I started doing that. Anyway, it would be a long story again.
Right. Well, so when you look at the illustrations, in the collection, I'm sure there's a variety of, can you, if you look at some and say, oh, that one's not so good, or these are really exemplary. Do we have the full range of things, or is it mostly the cream rose to the top on the illustrations?
I would say the illustrations in the rear books. People like to think that nowadays we know how to do everything better than they used to do. That's not necessarily true. Some of these artists from the 1800s were amazing. Maybe it's because they were willing to spend humongous amounts of time.
Yeah.
I don't know, but we have amazing artists today also, but many of the books we have in the rear book room, it took people their whole lifetime to create these books, so it wasn't something that you just tossed off in a year or 2 years worth of work. So, we have a variety of you know, the modern day illustrations, of course, are one thing that is interesting about scientific illustration. People always say to me, well, why do you need scientific illustrators? And more people take these fabulous photographs, but you still need an artist to look at things because they can, for example, if you're describing a new species of plant,
Mm-hmm.
if you take a photograph, it shows everything, which is good in a way. But if you want to emphasize certain aspects of that plant, an artist can eliminate certain things that are distracting and focus on other things that
Oh,
they
oh, I
want
didn't
to
know
convey,
that.
like the
Oh,
key characters of the plant. So
oh,
there's still a role for scientific illustration today.
oh, that's
It's
so
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah.
Gosh. Well, what's your favorite personal story from working at the Nat?
That would have to be my encounter when I trained the docents every year, like everybody else in BRCC. That's part of their training. And this was after I had become enamored of the Valentine collection of over 1,000 original, gorgeous watercolor paintings of California plants that were done in the early 1900s by A.R. Valentine and came to us from Ellen Browning scripts in the 30s. So I just love this collection, and partly because I had my own training in scientific illustration, I felt so bad that it was just kind of stored back there and languishing. And I really wanted to do a lot of things with that collection, but they all required money. And so that, you know, that bothered me. So anyway, I was training the docents, and afterwards, one of them came up to me and said, "What exactly do you want to do with that collection?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, I want to do everything. I need to have them photographed. I want to have the collection appraised. I've obviously I would love to exhibit them. They need a new case to be held in. I had a million things I wanted to do." And she said, "Well, I'm going to talk to my husband about that." And I thought, well, that's interesting. Okay. And that was Eleanor Navarra.
Uh,
And she talked to her husband, Jerry, of Jerome's Furniture, and they signed on to this project, which was like a dream come true for me. So because of that, I was able to do all those things I wanted to do with that collection. Um,
oh, that's
and,
wonderful.
and I feel it's in perfect condition now. It's stored really carefully. We were able to have an exhibition. We were able to secure their, have the paper conservators come over and look at them and do everything. It's like a librarian's dream to be able to really take care of your materials,
Yeah,
so
yes.
that are entrusted to you. And I felt such a close identification with Mr. Valentine because he spent 10 years of his life doing all these pictures, and they just were stored away. Nobody ever saw them. So it was kind of heartbreaking to me. So
Yeah.
that was a wonderful, wonderful experience for me.
Oh, it's so great that they, still come to the library. I know if I see Eleanor in the library, it seems like 100 years ago now that we could all
That's
be at
right.
the
Yeah.
museum, but it's
Yeah.
wonderful. So when we open up again, if people want to use the library, come and see things, what's the procedure? If
They
people want
just
to
contact me, email me, call me, we make an appointment.
come.
It's really easy to do. You can't just show up at the museum and expect to go in the library like you can in the public library, because if I'm somewhere else in the building, like if I'm in a meeting or, over in exhibits or something, the doors are obviously there's security doors there, so you can't just wander in. But I'm usually very happy to accommodate people that have an interest in coming in. So
Well, that's
I'd be pleased
wonderful.
to show people.
Oh, it's great. Well, I guess we have a couple more minutes. I don't know if anybody has any questions from our participants. But let's see. Did I forget anything, Margie? I'm just trying to, you've reminded me of so many things of when I was myself working with the collections and trying to, go through boxes and just remembering all the wonderful things that are
That's
there.
the only other thing someone asked at some point, what was the craziest story I have to tell? And I think Frank Stevens is one of our crazy characters. He, at age 84, he was wandering through the desert. Okay. I mean, his camera's incredible.
Yeah.
So he gets lost, and for 12 hours, he's wandering around the desert.
Oh,
They call the posse, the sheriff's posse has to come out from San Diego because everybody knows him, of course.
yeah.
And this was in the 30s, by the way. So at any rate, they go out there and they see some blood on a rock, and they follow the trail of this blood, and they finally find him. He had fallen and hit his head.
Oh,
But they took him to the hospital. He was fine. But the funniest thing about the whole thing is that he was out there wandering through the desert looking for fossils. And even though he was lost for 12 hours, he never let go of those fossils. Okay.
oh my
He
God.
got the fossils that he was looking for.
I never heard that story.
Yeah. So anyway, he survived.
Oh,
I mean, he had an amazing life, and he finally died. He was actually hit by a streetcar in downtown San Diego after
yeah.
all the other dangerous things he had done in his life. But what
Oh
a
gosh.
powerful guy. So
Yeah.
a lot of cool people in our history.
We have a question from Janet Klauber, and that is, what further goals do you have for your Nat Library work?
Oh gosh, just to get back in there and open it up.
Yeah, yeah.
Right now, that seems. Hi, Janet. By the way, that seems like such an impossible goal at the moment, but yeah, I'm hoping that it won't be too much longer before we can resume our work in the library, and always I hope more people will come in and take advantage of the wonderful resource that we have there. So,
And are there any, there's always something that can be done, or, modifications over time, or, at one point we had all the materials put into those the stacks, and I'm not saying it correctly, but are there any things like that that you see in the future that we'll be wanting to add to the library?
I don't think so. We have a real space crunch. I mean, the compactors have helped a lot in terms of, that they are compact, so you can fit a lot more books in a smaller space. But the rare book room is really full. At this point, we're always adding more to the archives as we go along. And of course, people discover things in their attic or whatever. And so I do frequently get donations of that kind. But I am not expecting, because it's been remodeled the way it is now, I'm not expecting anything major to be going on.
Well, that's nice that there isn't something looming. Well, I think our time is about finished, but I want to thank everybody for coming. And Margi, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us and telling us about the library. It's great that even if we can't go to the museum right now, at least we can, with our minds, go there.
That's true. And I'd encourage, if anybody has any further questions, you can always email me at library@sdnhm.org, because I'm the library. So I'll be happy to try to answer.
Well, thank you. And I just want to say to the members that the support is so important. I mean, it's been important for the length of time that we've been in business, and especially now, so essential. Our next member meetup is on November 6th, and Bradley's going to talk about exhibits. I can't wait. I love hearing him talk about that and his work. And then there's a Nat talk upcoming about wildfire, a tale of two backcountries, and that'll be on October 28th. So we're going to look forward to joining into those sessions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Anne and Margi. That was really, really neat to hear from you both. For those of you who maybe missed the first part, I know there was a little hiccup with the Zoom link. We did record this, and we will send that out to you all so you can rewatch as many times as you want. Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.